Welcome to yet another conversation of Architecture Talk Time with Sarah Kolata. Today I'm really excited to bring to you two curators, Övül Durmusoglu and Joanna Warsza, since she's Polish. I basically was really inspired by the project that they did in Berlin, where I also live, called Life, Art, Pandemic, and Proximity. And I wanted to discuss the concepts that they introduced into Berlin during the time of COVID-19 isolation. So welcome, ladies. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Sarah, for the invitation. Well, I'm Joanna Warsza, and I'm originally from Warsaw, but since 2011, I live in Berlin. It was a time where I was invited to work with Artur Żmijewski on the 7th Berlin Biennale. And then I stayed in Berlin, and I am also living in Prenzlauer Berg since 5 years.
Amazing. And Övül?
Yes, again, thank you, Sarah, for getting in touch and putting us in conversation with your research. My name is Övül Durmusoglu. I'm a curator, writer, and also work as educator. I think we both have similar also tracks with Joanna, also working as educators. My first, I come from the background of Turkey. And my connection with Germany started with a residency in Academy Schloss Solitude, and it got stabilized in 2015. And since then, I'm living in Prenzlauer Berg and going around the world for doing my work, but keeping my home happily here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So let's just jump straight into talking about the project that you guys did in Berlin. It was really interesting, the timing. Did you plan it ahead of time, or did the concept just emerge while COVID started?
Joanna, you want to start and I follow, maybe?
Okay. Yeah. Well, so a little bit, Sarah, as you were saying, I think one of the drives for the project was that in terms of COVID, we are asked to be so committed to online spaces, and without, as we talked with Övül, without actually considering that this also, there are many people and corporations who take profit out of it, and under which conditions do we do it. And of course, we felt, I guess, as many cultural workers, kind of a void, first of a physical encounter, but also of an encounter of art, which would be kind of a bodily experience. And far away from each other, we met in the park around 2 weeks ago, I would say. Yes. And Övül already had the idea a long time before about balconies as this thresholds between the private and the public. So some months ago we talked about it, but in this conversation in the park, it kind of occurred that the moment is now, that now the balconies, of course, have gained this amazing, extraordinary currency of being a public spaces and the private spaces at the same time. And from there, also what occurred is that the place where we live, Prenzlauer Berg, Berlin in general, but Prenzlauer Berg has so many artists that usually travel around the world or around Germany, and we are all here at this time. So those were the launching steps, and from there project grew immensely, very fast.
Yes, as it was this really sunny, nice day in the park where we spoke things over again with the things that we have been discussing around. And as someone coming from a Mediterranean, of course, background, balconies are like a kind of have a big social importance, and also they bring in communities together. They are also big show-off spaces with large and a lot of sun. So of course I have been thinking around a lot how the difference between actually where I live back then, where I come from, and where I live is so different in terms of these threshold spaces between the public and private and how they're activated. But indeed, it was more of a feeling the necessity to make a call to build a call for our own community who is here, who are here, who are like by themselves in their spaces and facing the uncertainty of closed institutions, indefinitely postponed exhibitions and gatherings, and only as an option out, as a digital space. I mean, our work is a very, very social work. So we decided actually that it can be important, it would be important to at least to make a step towards our community and ask and get their opinion if they would be eager to join us for an initiative as such, to send each other life signs and feeling together again within the limits of public health measures, that to be able to respond to the inertia and the feeling of helplessness, to really break it and to see if we can really make the space for ourselves and remind actually what art is good for in the first place. It's as an act of hope, as an act of survival, as an act of imagination.
Exactly. And, I feel really resonant with this project. This is why I got so instantaneously attracted to it, because I represent like the community of architects, and just like with art, it's the same. We're very much hands-on the production and being involved with like the design concept and working with other people, being team players and being all the time connected to the space. And I think with COVID, a lot of businesses and a lot of artists were out of a sudden forced to not only adapt to the new situation, potential consequences of the economic situation, but also actually to start thinking almost in a panic, what if this situation lasts for longer? Do I need to start building a digital presence? Do I need to start doing my business online, communicating with people and how I do it? So when everyone was stressed about this and sometimes facing the lack of knowledge even of how to do this, because not all of us have the background of how to move to digital realm and do business digitally, you guys said, you know what, this is amazing. Let's take the people that are forced to move digitally back to the realm of the physical and help them experience the relationship with the space and with the current situation. I love that, because when I talk about digital transformation, especially in the field of architecture and design, there is a lot of times the conversation starting about, if this is the future, if digital is the future, are we going to lose the connection of the team playing, the connection with the space and with each other? So what did you learn from the project as you implemented it? Was there any interesting observations that maybe could cover that subject somehow?
Ooh, there are so many things to say. I mean, we are still trying to understand the chain reaction and the resonance and the wide resonance our project created, and also for us, also personally as curators, and these questions are still, we are trying to also make it concrete for maybe possible future steps as well. Well, I mean, what we learned actually is that it's when it's the right moment and when it's the right team and group of people coming together, it is possible to do such a thing. It is possible to make this intervention. And it is, yes, I mean, it was the two curators mainly who made the call, but it was the community that embraced it and that shaped it. And we were also shaped by the reactions, by the responses our community gave us. And so this was a very beautiful, very necessary interaction. I mean, it was of course connected with the physical, but it was this emotional, connection that we managed to build through actually over emails and phone. So because this is how we also realized the project, it's mainly happened over the phone calls and emails. And at the final stage, we did some balcony visits, from balconies to balconies, or from ground up, to talk with the artists. Yeah, I think first of all that it is possible. It is possible to shake and stir things up. It is possible to still create the analog experiences, which are generally the basis of the digital experience anyway. So this is something that we shouldn't forget. Of course, we are all aware, especially in the moments of teaching and education right now, that how these tools become very useful. But at the same time, there is this analog element that is the base of it. And if it loses touch with it, then it just becomes this, disconnected space. So I think we all came to a realization of that, with also especially the reaction of our neighbors, the action of our different members of the artistic community who took on their bikes and came and did a hunt. And maybe one last point, like very small, to mention that it was also something, in the time of GPS and in the time of like the exact addressing and like the digital mapping, we especially followed a different route. We took a risk we didn't associate and match the addresses with the artists, and we created a different map, approximate map, but it was not about that exact location and point around and getting in touch, looking at the sky again, looking at the different spaces again, rather than only looking on the screen and trying to find the exact spot.
Wow, yeah. So very interesting. It's amazing. Joanna, do you have anything to add from your side?
Beautifully said about the mapping. What I can maybe add to the mapping is also that we, when now we talk about it and we continue to meet in the park and make like an evaluation about that one way of mapping this project, which also maybe broke traditional standards of how you make an exhibition, is that an artist list, an artist choice was determined by the quarter. So we basically invited all artists that we knew of and, friends of friends and suggestions, people living within this, let's say, zip code or zip codes, because I think there are three different
number of, yeah, three zip codes,
so, you might have completely different artists, some of them very international and part maybe of more like Berlin expat community, some East German artists that have been really squatting here since the 80s and then made their way and are real veterans and amazing people with a source of knowledge about that place. And somehow all of them found each other in that project and found kind of a connection exactly through the bodily presence in your flat or on your balcony at the same time. And even if we were not together physically as one body in one square, we felt we are there beyond the screen. So we created kind of a community in isolation. So that mapping actually questioned and maybe proposed another way of thinking what it is to curatorially work with so-called artist lists. Because of course lists are already kind of a way of measuring and selection. So that selection was much more the invitation was much more inclusive, and also for me personally, really it was, it gave me such a great feeling and belief in art. I mean, we all practice art or architecture, creative industries, to use this terrible term, but and from time to time, something happens that really reassures our belief that this is the right thing to do. And that was one of those projects, because really it felt that art has connected us. Of course, today we speak very much about the necessary jobs. For example, I'm not allowed to have my son in the kindergarten because my job is not necessary. It's not the priority job, right? I'm not a policeman, I'm not a doctor. And I understand that at the moment for the society, there is a top priority jobs. However, art, making art, curating art, maybe it's, I agree, it's not the first 10 priority, but it's, this project also showed how much needed it is in creating neighborhood, in bonding together, in overcoming isolation, not only through the screen, in surviving somehow together for this situation.
Yeah, it's so accurate actually what you're saying. It made me realize that indeed like the most meaningful art always came from like time of depression or turbulence within the society. And one of the things that I really found interesting what you said is how the community was created despite the social distancing, perhaps the fact that no one could gather in the same room, but they still were connected by this project. Did this experience somehow redefine the meaning of community for you, or perhaps added some new element that we never think about before?
I mean, I have been working actually also for, I think, the community and the collectivity and acts of togetherness, aesthetics of togetherness actually are the topics also that connect our practices, curatorial practices with Joanna. We have, of course, our different way of understandings, but we have like this core drive, let's say, to connect art with its community again, and to embrace its community again, and to enlarge it. This was yes, actually, like this was for us, like for a lot of things that I have been also recently writing in my recent that kind of texts and doing presentations, you know, thinking about new feminist communities, for example, in North Syria, in Rojava, and then we see like another, actually for our own, you know, from our locality, that it was not only the discourse, but it was something that was in action. That was the moment also when the act itself demands a new way of writing the theory of it. So I think this was really like, this was really decisive for me. For, of course, definitely, this experience strengthened me and connected me of that kind of what I believe in inherently in my heart, in the practice, in the practices that they've been running is true, and we should continue this drive, and we should allow the acts to redefine the vocabularies and the terminologies that we are using.
I like to say, inspired by another artist from Romania, Dan Perzhovsky. He, when I was working in Munich on a big project, Public Art Munich, he made my curatorial statement into a drawing. And in this drawing, you could see like monuments, cross N, turned into moments. And somehow this reflection continues here. Like, what is a public art? What is a relevant public art today? You know, what is public in public art? What makes the publicness moment, right? What puts us together as people, maybe feeling, sharing something? And I'm so grateful, we are so grateful to all the artists, you know, who took part, and we have received like never in our lives emails of gratitude, and we didn't do much, you know, we didn't install those works, it was all for free. Like our work as curators was minimal, and yet somehow the emotions we got back was really unheard of in a normal exhibition setting.
Yes.
Of course, and it's, you know, it's so understandable because you're doing this literally in the same week when MoMA is laying off all their educators because they don't know when they will reopen, and they're like the most like the richest museum in America, and they don't have a way in which at the moment they can bring the art to people. And you know, it's like, I think that globally galleries and museums are facing such a big problem, and it just shows how when we get stuck with trying to find a solution or really trying to hit the wall, okay, digital, how do we solve that? sometimes all it takes is to think really outside of the box, or just keep one leg back in the, in the normal life. And you guys proved it also by acting so fast, that you really fitted into this motion of the time and what was happening. And I think it was just a great response. Tell me, what was one of like your favorite happenings, or maybe an artwork, or perhaps just a reaction to a piece that really stuck with you?
Oh, it's another tough question. I mean, right now it is such an entity, and we are not actually. It's difficult, like kind of, to highlight one over the other, of course, because they of course have their meaning also in interaction with each other, rather than separate gestures. So that's also another power, I think, of this initiative. But of course, there were some works that we saw that really shook people, that really took people. They may not know the artists, and then they were just like kind of there, standing for a lot of time. I guess for me, the experience was with, especially working with very important also performance artists, Rabia Mraoui and Lina Majdalani, from Beirut, and living in Berlin for the last couple of years now, being based here, being very connected here. They did a really beautiful gesture of, first of all, getting in touch with their whole building and inviting their neighbors to join them in using the building to speak out for itself. And on their side, they, again, because they are very well known for their work based on the archival imagination and thinking, and they brought very beautiful images from their personal archives of the different balconies of the world, and associating them with important writers for them, and like doing very simple, again, it was very simply done. I think this is also something that really touched us and touched also a lot of people, that how simply it was done, and still how it is, the power is still there, and it is still able to communicate itself. But as I said, for me, it's like all the works are like kind of part of together in one universe. For me, they have their own universe in their communication. But yeah, this is one moment, I guess, that came forth. One of the moments that came forth.
It's really beautiful how you said that, because it made me realize how beautifully the building can be activated by this kind of action. And that concept of the balconies, actually one of the most powerful, I think, things I've seen since COVID started was a video on social media showing somewhere in Spain and in Italy, they created a time in a day, like let's just say it was 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., where everybody just comes out on the balconies and starts to upload for everyone who's working, like all the medical staff and, the police people. And like we said, all these kind of important roles right now in the society. And it was kind of talked about in the context of culture, and how culture is seen in such a different way in the northern parts of Europe, for example, and the southern. But I love this aspect, how actually, as the same as in your project, the balcony was that in between space where people could actually communicate physically with one another. And so they were coming out onto the balconies to clap and upload the rest, and it was just like a happening in the city. So very similarly activated buildings actually through a happening community, and the purpose behind it as well.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it is. Balconies, they have very rich political and social history all around the world. But I think in this particular period, they really became spaces of resilience. Also, they gained this meaning as well. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
I
like
never thought about.
Sorry, no, just to add to this, they are really public spaces because they have been used both for civic mobilization, for getting together, but of course we know also the propagandistic use of balconies, the dictatorial use of balconies, but also different forms. So it's interesting to look at the political history of balconies, of course, through that project.
How interesting, really. So what is the next step for the project? Are you taking it further? What's the plan? What can we look forward to?
Well, we are talking in the park, continue talking, but I think because this project broke already certain standards and certain prejudices that one might have about art, we would love somehow to structurally also go further with it and not claim like authorship over it, but maybe share it with those who think it's of some use. But we are looking for a right forum to do it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So where can we follow your action? Is there a place that we could go to?
This is also something that isn't built because everything had to happen so fast. We didn't have time to make a website. We mostly ran the project on social media communication. But now we are also working on our website to place the documentation and our conversations basically with the artists for people to have a resource to look at. And there are of course different colleagues around the world. We are in conversation. So how actually the format that becomes like a kind of a useful format for survival and imagination for other contexts as well. So we'll see.
For sure, there is a huge potential to scale it up. Definitely to also perceive it through different cultures and see perhaps the activation of different communities across the world that way. And yes, definitely the structure of bringing it to the digital realm where people can read about it and also see the recordings of it could very much help also spread the message. So it sounds like you guys are on a good track. If you wanted to, you can send me a link to perhaps if you created a group on Facebook or something where people can find you through this conversation as well to join the movement and see perhaps your profiles. What is the best platform for it at the moment?
I mean, at the moment, our event page is still active. We are keeping it also for sharing worldwide coverage of the Balcony. We are also like it's unbelievable from States to Indonesia, like all the way around, and we are also blown away by the circulation, and we are happy, of course. So most of these things we are still trying to keep the followers updated on the Facebook event page. But I mean, it may turn into its own page. So we need to also think about how the best to structure it. So basically it's also, but this is still the best way to reach us. And we also have a project email, thebalcony@gmail.com, where we're planning to also continue our further communication. So the Facebook page and thebalcony@gmail.com for the moment is the best way to reach us. Yeah.
Excellent. Are you perhaps, is the project now over after the 2 days that happened, or are you going to have another round of it in Berlin?
Let's see what happens with the situation. Yes. But one option we were also discussing yesterday is actually, because we are a community of artists living here, if we had more time, our list could grow
100
further.
100, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And we were actually also thinking, that every one thing in the art world is that every biennial wants to reinvent itself anew. Every exhibition has to have this primate of something that has never been there. So we were also speculating, what if we just continue like a sculpture project, art project, with the same people every year, and see where we stand and what are their preoccupations, and do they still live here, or maybe they moved out, and who was added to this place. And in kind of a neighborhoody way, but this neighborhood happens also to host so many excellent artists, to see, to look also at where do we stand now, right now.
Definitely. I think that with your action, you definitely proven that art can survive it all. Even in times where we're all told to stay at home and people are isolating and galleries are closed, you managed to bring it to people. And I really love that about the project. And there are so many other conceptual things that it kind of brings to think about, to ponder about, the concepts of community and a lot of other things as well. So I'm really curious to see where how it's going to evolve. I would love to see a version of it grow as well, and perhaps reach out of Berlin, and see, how other people would reinvent that concept. But yes, thank you so much for finding the time to talk to me about it and share your experience. And thank you also for putting it all up. It's really just great, a great gift to humanity in these times, for sure.
Oh, humbled. Thank you.
Thank you so
for
much.
Beautiful words. That's humbling. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.